Chapter 1761. Nole let off a chuckle and complimented her sarcastically, "You're very smart, Miss Livingstone." Zenovia was happy. "I'll take this as a compliment." Nole's eyes squinted slightly, and he added gloomily and sullenly, "But you're too presumptuous." Zenovia was startled. Nole got up, walked up to the French window, and stopped in front of the window pane. "You're in such a hurry to get married to me because of your father." Zenovia looked at him in surprise. Nole then explained calmly, "Your father killed someone, and the police are now onto him. Once the police discover this matter is related to your father, the Livingstones will be forever condemned back in Haniston. Your father is anxious about reconciling with me, and the incident that took place at the banquet has never been his main focus." "Mr. Knowles, what nonsense are you talking about?" Zenovia was flustered. "Father killed that woman whose name is Lisa because she threatened him. He did so only to protect himself, and there's nothing wrong with it." Nole looked at her through the window pane and said with an indifferent and deep tone, "Lisa knew about your father's secret. That's why your father wouldn't let her live." Zenovia's body swayed while her face gradually turned pale. How could he know about this? Nole stopped in front of her. "You guys are the ones who need my help instead of the other way around. But you've been acting too presumptuously. You can't even tell the situation that you're in and chose to provoke me, forcing me into marrying with the Livingstones?" Zenovia's eyes turned bloodshot instantly. "Nole, asking you to marry me has nothing to do with this. With the effect of the current predicament that the Livingstones are in, how much longer can your family maintain its stability? And here you are trying to list out the benefits that your family can bring to me in order to persuade me. So, what benefits can you bring me? All you want is for me to clean up your father's mess, or perhaps you're looking to use my kinship with the royal family to consolidate the Livingstones' presence and position in Haniston?" His words pierced right through her heart. Zenovia's body swayed, and she lost balance and staggered backward. Nole's gaze looked as sharp as a sword. It seemed that nothing could escape his observation. "I have to admit that in addition to personally wanting to marry Nole, I was also thinking about my father's incident and the Livingstones' future. As for Lisa's incident, once my father's involvement was discovered, the consequences would be unimaginable." Not long after Zenovia left the Knowles mansion, Edison walked into the study and said, "Sir, are you looking for me?" Nole, who was standing in front of the window, turned to look at him. "Did anything happen to Mr. Livingstone?" Edison replied, "As usual, Mr. Livingstone is contacting some of the nobles. Perhaps he's trying to avoid the limelight. He hasn't even contacted Donald so far. By the way, he's also investigated Mr. Coleman Goldman's identity. Lisa had unexpectedly died in the hospital, and the police had not gotten to the bottom of the truth. It was estimated he had bribed some of the employees to tamper with the surveillance system of the hospital. Juno was afraid of being suspected and did not dare to contact Donald. After all, Donald was the person who had arranged for Lisa to serve him. However, in addition to Lisa, Colton also knew his secret. That was why he might have also investigated Colton. Colton was a member of the Goldmans, so he did not dare to make a move on him. But when they learned about Daisy's identity at the banquet, they realized they had unintentionally offended the Goldmans. As such, Juno could not guarantee that the young master of the Goldmans would not reveal his secrets. Otherwise, Juno would not have brought Zenovia with him to apologize at this time so that he could make Zenovia think she had a chance. As long as Juno could make Zenovia think Nole had chosen to get engaged to Daisy because he was afraid of the Goldmans and give her the opportunity to sow discord between the Goldmans and him so that he would accept the Livingstones' help, then Juno's goal would have been considered achieved. Nole went around the corner of the desk and sat back on the leather chair. His gaze looked indifferent. "Continue to keep an eye on Mr. Livingstone. By the way, find someone to secretly provide clues to the police and lead them in Mr. Livingstone's way." Chapter 1762. Since Juno had the guts to use his daughter to sow discord, he would never have imagined that the person who first planned to get rid of Lisa through him would be Nole. A week later. Daisy was preparing for the exam at the college as always. When the exam was over, she went to the office building to look for the professor and asked for the list of titles of her graduation thesis in drama and film performance. The professor was a little surprised. "Are you planning to prepare for the topic of your graduation thesis in advance?" Daisy nodded. She was a year away from graduation, but Colton was already preparing for his graduation, and she did not want to procrastinate. At the Royal College of Victoria, the graduation requirement was simple. As long as the students had completed all subjects of the course and obtained good grades in all those subjects, they would be able to apply for graduation in advance. The drama, theater, and film department was no exception. "Okay then." The professor nodded and handed the title of Daisy's graduation thesis to her. "Godspeed." Daisy walked out of the office building with the title of her graduation thesis. There was a total of 49 thesis topics in the drama, theater, and film department of Victoria College. It would take at least 3 months to study all the topics accurately and come up with a conclusion. "Daisy." She paused, turned around, and saw Freya approaching her. She then placed the list of titles of graduation thesis back into her bag. "I'm heading to the library. Do you want to tag along?" Freya smiled. "Let's go." The two came to the library, and Freya went to reserve a seat first, while Daisy found herself several famous foreign film and television exam preparation books on the bookshelves. "I heard that the adopted daughter of the Noles died mysteriously in the hospital some time ago. How do you know about this?" Daisy stopped what she was doing. She then walked slowly to the back of the bookshelves and saw a few girls standing and chatting in front of the window. "My father is a police officer and is in charge of this case. I heard that she was kidnapped by someone, and her fingers were amputated. She then died inexplicably in the hospital later. Wasn't she working in the black market? She must have offended someone there." Daisy leaned against the bookshelves. Although she did not like Lisa, her death still shocked her deeply. She was about to leave when someone suddenly said, "Could it be Nole's doing?" After all, that woman had tried to seduce him before and offended his girlfriend. Could it be that the Goldmans are very upset about this, and that's why they're not letting them get engaged? If that's the case, things should get a lot more difficult for Miss Livingstone in the future, shouldn't it? After all, she tried to snatch Miss Goldman's boyfriend from her. If Nole were to be asked to choose one between the Goldmans and the Livingstones, it's only normal for him to pick the Goldmans over the Livingstones. After all, the benefits that the Goldmans can provide are larger and better than what the Livingstone. Before the girl could finish speaking, someone jerked her arm, and all the girls looked over at Daisy with an embarrassed expression. Daisy took a deep breath and refuted calmly, "If you don't know him, don't talk about him behind his back. His choice has nothing to do with the benefits that he can obtain from the Goldman." The girls did not say anything. It seemed that they did not have any objections on the surface, but they whispered among themselves after Daisy left, "If not for her identity as the daughter of the Goldmans, do you think Nole would associate himself with her?" Daisy's back felt stiff. She could not help but tighten her grip on the book in her arms as all those sentences kept echoing in her mind. Even if he's not doing so for the benefits, the public, even Dad, will think so too. I don't care what they think about me. I care if you think of me the same way too. I have the freedom to pick whatever I want, but as a Goldman, do you think you have the luxury of making your own decisions? If not for her identity as the daughter of the Goldmans, do you think Nole would associate himself with her? The voices echoing in Daisy's head all overlapped and sounded extremely confusing, and Daisy's vision blurred gradually. There was a commotion in the library, and Freya, sitting in the seat waiting for Daisy, turned around, looked in the direction of the commotion, and heard someone's voice. "Someone's fainted." Chapter 1763. Freya fought her way through the crowd, and her expression changed instantly when she saw the person lying on the ground. She hurried forward and shouted, "Daisy!" She called out to the crowd around them, "Call an ambulance." Daisy was sent to the hospital. Freya stood anxiously in the corridor and waited until Waylon and Colton arrived. Colton stepped forward quickly, grabbed her wrist, and asked, "Why would Daisy faint all of a sudden?" Freya did not answer. Waylon lifted his hand and placed it on his shoulder. "Cole, calm down." Only then did Colton let go of her, his expression terrifyingly gloomy. At that moment, the doctor came out of the ward, and Waylon asked, "How is she?" The doctor took off the mask and replied, "It's not a big problem. The patient's diet and lifestyle have been a little irregular. When these issues are coupled with fatigue, they lead to hypoglycemia and a blackout. She'll have to adjust her lifestyle for a period." After the doctor left, Waylon pushed open the door of the ward. Daisy was lying on the hospital bed with a fluid infusion, and all the blood had been drained away from her cheeks. Waylon frowned. "She's been eating very little in the villa recently, but I don't know how things are at the college. I know that she's been rather emotionally bothered recently. It's just that she's been keeping it to herself. In addition to the intense exam preparations that she's been undergoing throughout this week, she also refused to relax and grab some rest. Nole seems to be the reason for her sudden hard work." Noticing something, Colton turned around immediately and looked at Freya. "Where's Nole?" Freya was startled for a split second, lifted her gaze, and stared at him. "Is there a point for us to locate Nole at this moment?" He narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean by that?" Freya scoffed. "You people from the Goldmans are somewhat responsible for the incidents that are going on between Daisy and him. Do you know what Zenovia thinks about Daisy? She claimed that Daisy is a girl who can't even make a single decision that's related to her own affairs, so aren't the Goldmans the biggest factor she's been able to get together with Nole up to today?" She glanced at Daisy. "She's the only daughter of the Goldmans, who's loved by everyone in the family, but you guys are the people who decide her own fate for her on her behalf. The so-called wings that you people use to cover and protect her are just a cage to her." Colton's expression turned colder, and his masseter muscles twitched. "You don't even know shit about us, so what makes you think you're in the position to criticize us?" "I might not know anything." Freya was expressionless and stared directly at him without any fear, "but the only thing that I know is that a living person should have the right to think and make decisions for themselves. Everything that happens in her life, you guys shouldn't be the ones who tell her what's right and what's wrong. It should be up to her to figure it out herself." Colton lifted his hand abruptly. Freya did not dodge as he punched the wall behind her, and she felt a gust of wind whistling in her ears for a second. There was a moment of silence in the ward. Colton was holding back something all this while, but he did not utter a single word in the end. Waylon walked behind him, took a glance at Freya, and put his hand on Colton's shoulder. "Cole, now is not the time to lose your head." Colton withdrew his arm, ignored the pain on the back of his hand and the bruise on his knuckles, turned around, and left the ward without saying anything. Waylon did not stop him. His gaze was fixed on Freya's calm face. "You're right, we should be held accountable, but you've misunderstood what we meant too." Freya was stunned for a split second and stared at him without saying a thing. "Cole, Daisy, and I weren't by our father's side when we were born. Our mother was the only one who took care of the three of us. That's why to me and Cole, protecting our little sister has always been our responsibility." He continued to explain slowly and indifferently. Cole's extremeness started only after what happened to Daisy, because of Lisa, and not to mention the hurtful things that Nole said to Daisy before the accident that gave him amnesia, as what he said had caused Daisy to misunderstand. So it's inevitable that Colton will be rather harsh when it comes to protecting Daisy. Chapter 1764. Nevertheless, we've never thought about preventing Nole and Daisy from being together. However, if Nole gets engaged to Daisy before the Knowles group manages to stabilize its development, the public opinion won't favor him at all. Freya took a deep breath. But what if he doesn't care about that? He may not care about that, but does Daisy not care about it too? Waylon's words hit Freya directly. Daisy believes that she wants to get engaged to Nole because of her feelings for him, but the public will only believe that Nole wants to get engaged to her only because of what's in it for him. A controversial marriage won't last long. Who can guarantee that their relationship will never be affected by all those controversies? Even when a powerful man wants to marry a woman of unequal status, he will still require the woman's family to be pure and squeaky clean. And when it comes to a marriage between two wealthy and powerful families, the equal match in terms of the strength of the two families will rise to the top of the list. Although these words will make others mistakenly think that the Goldmans are looking down on the Noles, however, on the contrary, Nole's strength is something that the Goldmans dare not underestimate. If Nole doesn't even believe in himself, then that will be a waste of the trust that we have in him. Freya remained silent. Daisy is the daughter of the Goldmans. Her marriage will naturally attract the attention of multiple parties. Even if Nole isn't the person who wants to marry her today, but someone else, the person will still have to withstand the intense controversy and pressure. In a marriage relationship, when the lady's family is slightly weaker in terms of family background, outsiders will rarely comment that the woman is in it for the status or the money because, since ancient times, men have always been expected to perform better and stronger than women. It's always been a traditional standard. So although they're the relatives of the royal family of Yaramur, the Noles are still not powerful enough to be on a par with the Goldmans in terms of their financial strength and their status in the business field if Nole wants to marry Daisy. This marriage is bound to be controversial, just like Ken's. He was engaged to Lara, but no one had high hopes in their relationship. It did not matter whether he was in it for the love or the money. In the end, it was about what the public thought about their relationship. Daisy regained consciousness gradually, and the first thing that caught her sight was the white ceiling and that the room that she was in was pervaded with the scent of disinfectant. Immediately afterward, Daisy saw a familiar figure by the window and sat up abruptly. Her action surprised him. Nole walked to the bed and pressed her back onto the bed. "Don't move." Daisy turned her face away and did not look at him. Nole sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to caress her cheek. However, she smacked his hand away, refusing to let him touch her. He leaned over, approached her, and moved the clumps of hair that were stuck to her sweaty forehead off her forehead with his fingertips. "Are you still mad at me?" "It's none of your business." He responded with a light hum. "But I care about your agenda." Daisy turned her back to him. "Why aren't you with Zenovia? Why are you here?" Nole caressed the ends of her hair, and his gaze landed on her side profile. "You've misunderstood the thing between us." Daisy looked dejected. "No matter what's the thing that's going on between the two of you, I won't care about it anymore." Nole's chest heaved violently, and he turned her body over, forcing her to face him. "Daisy." Her tears began to gush down the sides of her face. She looked all broken, weak, and extremely vulnerable. "If you want to end things between us, just say it. Why must you avoid me deliberately?" "I won't pester you." "I'll never." Nole sealed her lips forcibly without giving her any time to react. Her weeping stopped, but her drenched eyelashes were still glistening, and she was about to run out of breath. Nole left her lips and wiped the tears on the corners of her eyes away with his fingertips. The way she looked while she was crying really pierced through his heart. "I didn't plan to end things between us, Daisy." Daisy panted. "But you've been avoiding me." Nole rubbed the corner of her eyes repeatedly and stared at her face. "I'm sorry, Daisy. I didn't think things through when I brought up our engagement to you. I was afraid that you'd blame me, and I was afraid that you'd misunderstand me." He leaned over and kissed her between the eyebrows. "I don't care about what other people think, but I do care about how you feel." Chapter 1765. Daisy sobbed softly. "I just don't want others to see you that way." Nole's lips landed on the tip of her nose and cheeks, and his warmth was on the brink of scorching her. "I don't care how others view me, but Daisy, if I want to marry you, we can't let our marriage be filled with all sorts of controversies. My future wife shouldn't be exposed to all these public opinions. No matter what the controversies are, I'll be able to handle them. But Daisy might not be able to do the same. She's very sentimental and is easily influenced by public opinion. Even if she's being assaulted by the public for me, I won't allow that. Daisy. He kissed her, give me some time. Wait for the day to come when I'm able to marry you without any questions from the public. Daisy suddenly turned over and pressed him against the bed. I don't care. You've made me angry for so many days, you must compensate me. Nole was stunned. He stared at the person sitting on his body and laughed abruptly. How do you want me to compensate? Daisy approached him. I want. The door of the ward was pushed open all of a sudden, and Daisy and Nole looked over at the same time. What caught their eyes were Yorick and Zyla, who were standing at the door. Zyla saw the scene presented right in front of her, gasped, and pretended to be surprised. Oh my God, I didn't expect you to be such an aggressive person, Daisy. Daisy was astounded for a few seconds. She then blushed instantly and got down from Nole in a panic. Aunt Zyla, that's not it. Zyla waved her hand. I totally understand that. We've all been young and wild once. Daisy was so anxious she blushed and stared over at Nole, asking for help. Nole got up calmly and adjusted his shirt. Mr. Hathaway, Mrs. Hathaway. Yorick responded with a hum and placed the fruit basket in his hand on the table. Are you feeling better, Daisy? Nole took a glance at her and smiled. Is she still not lively enough to convince you? Who would believe that she's sick at this very moment? Daisy wanted to step on his leg, but he seemed to have expected her to react in this way and retracted his leg, so she missed her target. How could Yorick not see their tiny movements? He cleared his throat. Glad to hear that. This will save her father from worrying about her every second of the day. Daisy turned to look at him. My dad knows about this? Yorick smiled. How could he not know? Daisy pursed her lips. She had caused her family to worry about her because she was too stubborn and did not take good care of herself. Yorick looked at Nole. Mr. Knowles, is it convenient for you to come out with me for a chat? Nole and Yorick left the ward while Daisy returned to the bed and looked toward the door from time to time. Zyla walked to the bed, took a seat, picked up an apple, and started peeling it for her. Are you that worried about your boyfriend? Daisy choked on her saliva and buried her blushed face in her pillow. No, I'm not. Zyla could see through her mind clearly. Sure enough, it's almost impossible to keep a daughter home when she's of age. It's no wonder Nolan is so worried about his daughter being abducted. In fact, there's no need for him to worry at all, because even without an abduction attempt, his daughter would have already left him with the other party without any hesitation. Daisy frowned. Aunt Zyla, you're still making fun of me. Zyla chuckled, cut a segment of apple out of the peeled apple, and handed it to her. Don't blame your dad. He's doing all these solely out of consideration for your future. After all, Nole is such a capable son-in-law. I don't think your dad will let him escape his grasp. If he doesn't want Nole to marry you, then I'll take over and reserve a spot for Xena. Daisy was astonished for a few seconds. But that's impossible. Xena is still so young. Age is just a number. Haven't you heard this saying? I'll be happy to have him as my son-in-law. That's impossible. She was about to say, he's mine. Seeing how nervous Daisy was, Zyla laughed. Okay, I'll stop teasing you already. No one will snatch him from you. After a while, Nole and Yorick returned to the ward. Chapter 1766. Zyla turned to look at them. If you didn't come back, Daisy would rush out. Daisy's face was steaming as she buried her head under the covers. Yorick laughed. Stop teasing her. Are you going to calm her down if she cries? I won't have to. She has someone to do that. Zyla walked toward Yorick, held his arm, and looked at Nole. Take care of your future wife. We're leaving. Nole nodded. They were the only people left in the room. Daisy popped her head out from under the covers and put one hand on the edge of the bed. A shadow loomed over her while a warm breath blew onto her hair. You're embarrassed? Her face was burning hot as she avoided his gaze. What did Uncle Yorick say to you? Take a guess. No. Nole touched her hair and looked deep into her eyes. He said that he leaned in and whispered into her ear. Daisy laughed, then hit him. Nole sat at the edge of the bed and laughed, not moving away. That afternoon, at the Sunrise Hotel, Juno walked around the living room while the assistant walked in. He walked to him and lowered his head. Mr. Livingstone, it's done. Juno frowned and double confirmed. You didn't leave any traces, did you? No, the police would think that it's a normal breaking and entering that went wrong. We found people who did time before and were owing money. They were willing to do anything if we paid them. Even if the police found them, they wouldn't link them back to you. Juno chuckled. Great. Lisa knew his secret and threatened him, so there was no way he would let her live. As such, he had quietly paid the people in the hospital to get rid of her. He had paid them a sum of money and got them to create some fake evidence and alter the surveillance footage. To be careful, Juno had his assistant get rid of them too. Not long after the secretary left, Zenovia rushed in to see him. Dad, let's go back to Hanniston. Juno, who was seated on the couch drinking coffee, looked up curiously. Are you going to marry Nole when you get back to Hanniston? Zenovia remembered what Nole had said to her and was uncertain. She grabbed her skirt and said, He won't marry me, Dad, forget it. Nole knew what her father had done. If he was forced, he would expose all that, and her family might become someone the public despised because of the bad reputation. When that happened, the socialite of Hanniston would be a joke to everyone. Zenovia, are you not confident in yourself? Weren't there problems with Nole and that Goldman girl? All you need to do is be there at his lowest so he can change his mind about you. Zenovia's face dropped when she heard how easy her father thought it would be. Even if she wanted to marry Nole, now wouldn't be a good time. If the Livingstone fell, she wouldn't have anything to go against Daisy with. But she would not sacrifice her future for what her father had done. 2 days later, Nole brought Daisy home to see his mother. Diana couldn't stop smiling when she saw that they were back together and pulled her next to her. You should come to visit me every day after this. That will make me happy. Daisy paused. I wouldn't want to intrude. No, not at all. I look forward to it. The more Diana looked at her, the more she liked her, but she felt differently toward her son. Chapter 1767. Nole picked up someone's call, and Diana held on to Daisy's hand when he got up to leave. Don't blame Nole. He really wants to marry you. He didn't stop working even when he was sick. He's someone who loves to handle everything by himself. He would rather be misunderstood than explain himself. But as a mother, I understand him and know he likes you a lot. Daisy paused, then after a while, she looked down and mumbled, Really? She was curious. Nole didn't remember their past, so when did he start having feelings for her? Diana laughed. You're so lovable. If I like you too, it's impossible that he doesn't. The girl had some sort of magic to her. She was innocent, and her kindness was contagious and made people not want to leave her and want to protect her. Diana thought that was how her son felt too, and that was why he was so in love. Outside, Nole answered the call from Edison, who said that a guard from the hospital was robbed by someone with a gun and was stabbed a few times. He was pronounced dead after emergency first aid. His eyes were dark. Armed robbery? That's too much of a coincidence. Edison said, they're probably trying to shut him up. Get more information. He ended the call and stood on the spot, deep in thought. Daisy suddenly popped her head out from behind him. Who was that? Nole grabbed her by her waist and pulled her forward. Why did you come outside? I came out to see you. She looked around. If you're busy, I could underscore. Before she could finish, Nole kissed her. I'm not busy today. I'm all yours. His warm breath surrounded her and made her heart skip a beat. She didn't know where to look. Don't work too hard. You need to rest when it's time to rest. Nole smiled. Are you feeling bad about it? Daisy looked at him and smiled. If you die of exhaustion, who's going to marry me? Nole wore a wide smile and pressed his lips to her forehead. Then I shouldn't die of exhaustion. Nole, I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes. So don't work yourself too hard. Daisy hugged him by his waist and pressed her cheek on his heaving chest. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked at the top of her head. Even her little swirl was adorable. He laughed. All right. Meanwhile, at the college, Freya walked out of the building, turned a corner, and bumped into Colton, speaking to his friend. She looked at his left hand. When he punched the wall, it was so hard she felt the wall shake. Colton looked at her, and while the people around him were having a laugh, he wasn't. When they walked past her, Freya suddenly asked, Is your hand okay? Colton stopped and looked at her with no expression. It's none of your business. Freya shrugged. She was aware of his temper, and it would be understandable he was still defensive since what she had said made him angry. She walked past him, but Colton spoke. Hey. Freya turned around. Yes? Colton squinted at her. Weren't you afraid that I would hit you the other day? I was just being honest and went overboard, but I would understand if you weren't happy about it and hit me. Chapter 1768. Freya knew that she was too frank, and since she didn't understand the entire situation, she couldn't blame anyone if she took a hit. You're good at offending people. Colton looked at her before taking his leave. Freya stood in her spot and thought about what he meant. Was he implying that she was offensive? But flattery wasn't her style. That evening, at the Hilton Villas, Daisy walked into the living room and smelled dinner, so she walked into the kitchen. Waylon wore a black shirt and made a stew with one hand on his waist. The kitchen was filled with the smell of stew. He adjusted the heat, then turned to face her. Dinner is ready. Wash your hands. Okay. Daisy happily rolled up her sleeves. The housekeeper had been on leave since Waylon was back. After the food was placed on the table, Daisy immediately picked up her fork to try it. Waylon handed her some potatoes. Do you like it? She smiled happily. Yes, you're as good of a cook as Dad. I wonder who will be lucky enough to become my sister-in-law. Anyone who married Waylon would be a happy wife. Waylon laughed and changed the subject. You're getting your appetite back after getting back with Nole. Daisy choked, looking awkward. Sorry, I won't do that again. She bit down on her fork and was so ashamed she wished there was a hole she could hide in. Waylon messed up her hair. You worry me. She put up her hand and said, I swear I won't do that again. I'll take my meals. He laughed. Go ahead then. Daisy smiled and nodded. After dinner, Daisy returned to her room to work on her paper. She wanted to graduate earlier so she could train herself because she wanted to be more useful. A week passed. Shocking news swept over the media. Mr. Livingstone from Hanniston was arrested for investigation because he was involved in an assassination. The person who reported it was his own daughter, Zenovia Livingstone. When Edison heard the news, he immediately went to the office. Sir, Mr. Livingstone has been arrested. Nole casually went through his file. I know. Miss Livingstone reported him and sent her own father to prison. It was a murder case. Edison didn't understand how Juno's own daughter could have sent him to prison. Nole closed his file and looked up calmly. She sent him away to protect the family's reputation. That was some tactic. If Juno was arrested for being involved in a murder, and the informant was his daughter, people would think she was doing the right thing for the greater good and praise her for it. That way, the Livingstones would still have influence in Hanniston and not be affected by that. People would even look up to her. Zenovia did all that for herself. At the same time, at the police station, Zenovia walked to the window and sat down across from her father, separated by a piece of glass. She picked up the phone. "Dad, I'm sorry." Juno took a deep breath and swallowed his anger. "Zenovia, do you know what you're doing? I'm your father." "Yes, I had to do it because you're my father." Zenovia sounded calm. Juno was stunned before frowning. "Zenovia, have you gone mad?" Chapter 1769. My mind is clear. Zenovia stared at Juno with no expression. "Dad, this was all your fault. If it weren't for Lisa, I wouldn't have learned that you have been cheating on Mom. You've always been a good dad, but that was all a lie." "Zenovia, I did all that because Nole knows what you did. If he exposed you, the consequences would be severe. I was just thinking about our family." Juno held his breath and looked sick and pale as if he had lost his will to fight back. Zenovia was still calm. "Don't blame me. Your sentence will ensure that our family is safe. Don't worry. No one is going to discover your secrets. I've got you the best lawyer team in Hanniston, and even if you're sentenced to prison, you'll get a reduced sentence. That's all that I can do for you." She ended the call and left. Juno froze in his seat because never would he imagine that he would one day fall at his daughter's hands. When he was brought away by the police, he had been laughing and crying because he had underestimated his own daughter. Zenovia left the police station and went to the palace to see the king. King William had heard about her father's case, and seeing how sad she was, he sighed. "Your father made a mistake for getting involved in that." Zenovia said, "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. We've let you down." The king waved his hand. "It's not your fault. You didn't choose to cover up for your father." He appreciated what Zenovia did, and with her capabilities, it would be perfect if she was willing to help his grandson. Unfortunately, his grandson didn't have feelings for her. "Zenovia, I can't force it to work between you and Nole, but if you're willing, I'll make you my god-granddaughter, and I'll send you to work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs once you graduate. What do you think?" Zenovia tried really hard to control her expression. "I will not let you down." She spoke to William for 20 more minutes before leaving. Her expression disappeared when the door closed behind her, and she balled up her fists. Did the king not push for their marriage because he knew Nole was dating a Goldman? No matter, as long as the king trusted her, it would be fine if she was just the god-granddaughter. If she kept the relationship close, Nole would one day be hers. At noon, at the Nole's mansion. Has my father lost his mind? How could he take Miss Livingstone as his god-granddaughter? Diana couldn't believe it when she found out. Rick comforted her. Don't be angry. Since His Majesty had taken her as his god-granddaughter, doesn't that mean that he has accepted Nole and Daisy? It was better for her to be a god-granddaughter than his daughter-in-law. Diana crossed her arms and scoffed. Do you really believe that? Women had a scarily accurate instinct, especially a royal, because they had seen too much deception. Zenovia assumed that she could win over King William and become his god-granddaughter. A foreigner who had no ties to the royals with no contribution, was it possible that she had no ulterior motives? Rick wouldn't deny that, so he rubbed her shoulders. All right, even if His Majesty likes her, you will have the final say when it comes to whom we take as our daughter-in-law. Chapter 1770. Diana scoffed, that's true. She won't be able to take Daisy's place as long as I'm around. Meanwhile, at the college, Daisy and Freya were having their meal in the canteen when she suddenly got a call from Diana, who asked her to go over for dinner with Nole. After the call ended, Freya smiled and said, I guess my aunt already treats you as her daughter-in-law. Daisy blushed when she heard the word daughter-in-law. You need to stuff more food in your mouth. The people sitting at the next table were talking about how Zenovia became the god-granddaughter of the king because the news spread everything, and Zenovia was cast under the limelight. After Daisy heard that, she looked toward Freya. Freya looked up. What's wrong? Daisy shook her head and lowered her eyes. Don't you care? Freya was the king's granddaughter, but the king would rather take someone with no blood relation to him as his granddaughter. That was ironic. Freya drank her drink and looked calm. I don't care. You're the one who should be worried. She paused. Me? If the king supports Zenovia, her status will be different from before, so you have to be careful. That woman isn't a simpleton. Daisy fell silent. That afternoon, she texted Waylon to tell him that she wouldn't be back for dinner. Waylon didn't ask any questions. A car slowly drove next to her, and she got in. Nole took her bag. I guess I'm on time. Aunt Diana is so welcoming. She wants me to go for dinner every day. She was a little embarrassed, but couldn't say no. Nole smiled. It's because she likes you. At the Nole's mansion. The helpers made a big meal. Diana waited at the door, smiling and waving when she saw Daisy getting out of the car. Daisy. She was surprised. Aunt Diana, why are you waiting outside? Diana held her hand and smiled. Don't worry about it. I couldn't wait to see you. Come in. Daisy looked back at Nole, who was talking about something with Edison. Edison started speaking after seeing them walk into the house. Madame was very angry when she found out that the king made Miss Livingstone his god-granddaughter. Nole nodded. All right. His mom loved Daisy because she was innocent, so he wasn't surprised that she didn't like Zenovia. Zenovia had gone over the Noles and announced that she would marry into the family just with the king's support, which showed she had no respect for them. And Diana was sensitive about the king taking in an outsider because of how he insisted on taking another wife. The other woman, Sandy Pruitt's mother, was the godsister of the king. He loved his second wife and ignored his wife. When the Noles were threatened by Madame Knowles all those years ago, his second wife had just passed away, and he was handling the funeral, so he hadn't helped them. That was why Diana was defensive when it came to her father until Nole was kidnapped when he was 3 or 4. To make it better for his wife and Diana, the king finally openly announced that Nole was his only grandchild and gave him 20% of his inheritance.